is visible. Okay, so just 5 seconds to present you a little bit, give you a sort of a overview of this session. So we have two fire start speakers. The first one is Dominique Campanella. He's co-founder of Concula, and the second one is Mark Bosman, strategy director of Nauf Insulation. And they will share with you very interesting ideas about circularity and how circularity is tackled from the point of view of a small company and also from the point of view of a large manufacturer. And please try to adapt your presentation to the 10 minutes you have each, because I think that one of the most relevant issues in this session is the discussion. So we will encourage you to participate in the discussion. We have fixed three main topics: value chain, enables and barriers of circularity, and research and innovation topics. But of course, the idea is that Dominic's and Mark's speech could serve as inspirational talks for many other discussions you can think about. And try to use the chat and to discuss, and we will comment about that and try to give some relevant conclusions. So thank you very much. And Dominique, the floor is yours. Let me put my okay. So thank you very much. Dominique, please, you can start.
I see that there is a message from Dominique in the chat that he cannot share his video.
Ah, okay.
Neither
No,
his
no,
voice.
no. Okay, but he's here. Okay, no problem. So I will just share the Dominique's presentation, and that's it. I have the presentation. So let me cannot share my video and voice. Oh, okay. So Dominique, I think you have to enter in the invitation. Yeah, okay. Anyway, maybe Mark, if you don't mind, maybe we can start with your presentation and then switch on just in case there are some problems. Okay,
Good.
let me share the.
For me, good.
Yeah,
If you can share it. For me, you'll have the voice, no picture, because the camera of my computer broke down, so nothing to do with the system. But I have no camera on my computer for the moment.
okay,
So
no
you'll need to
problem.
do it without seeing me, but you'll have the speech. If you can put my slides on.
Yeah, sure. I will try to do it.
So as you introduced, from our side, clearly a presentation about circular economy for a larger product manufacturer, Knauf Insulation. So we produce glass mineral wool and rock mineral wool insulation mainly. That's it. Good. So really the circularity from Knauf Insulation. So glass and rock mineral wool producer. If you can bring me to the next slide. When we speak about circular economy, it's something that I'm always happy to present from our sustainability perspective. We have a sustainability strategy in two timelines, and the one that you see on the left side, which was the strategy that we have implemented from 2010 to 2020, where you see that you have elements which are linked to circularity, and the waste one is there for us one a very important is that we aim to quite drastically reduce the amount of waste that goes from our plants to the landfill. So that was the, I would say, the historical way that we looked to circular economy, knowing that for some of our products, typically in glass mineral wool, we already function with very high amounts of recycled content. We are running up to percentages from 60 to 80% of what we put in our melters to produce our materials are recycled content. In starting in 2020, we opened up our strategy. We have set up a new strategies from 2020 to 2025 based on 5 different pillars, of which the third pillar is completely focused on circular economy, but really broadening it up towards our whole value chain. If you can bring me to the next slide. So that's called For a Better World. Yep. And one more. In that strategy, we made a certain amount of commitments. The first commitment towards circular economy is that we want to use resources that have a minimum environmental impact. So we are continuously increasing the amount of recycled content. Internally, we work with the principle that on the long term, the secondary raw materials will become the vast majority of what we put into our production processes. So that's we work step by step to that. In the previous slides, I showed you that we had the ambition to send a very low amount. No, you can leave that slide. Sorry, you in that we want to send no waste to landfill from our plants anymore, and that's something that we have broadened up, and that will also be the content of my presentation today. Is that the ambition that we have for our own plants, meaning that no mineral wool insulation should still go to landfill from our plants, is also what we are pushing towards our whole value chain. We are making products which have no intention to end up in a landfill at any moment. They are a valuable material, and we want to take our responsibility to make that happen. The third one is focusing on the packaging to have a packaging with a minimum environmental impact. I know that quite obviously the question that really pops up quite frequently is, why are you not avoiding packaging? A very logic reason for us, if you look to glass mineral wool, we have a density of 20 kilograms per cubic meter, so which means that it's way too light to transport it. So we use our packaging, in fact, to compress it at densities around 100 or 150, even sometimes 200 kilogram per cubic meter. So the packaging, the little impact you have in the packaging, we really need it to make our transport more efficient. Yes, next slide. If we look really to the send zero waste to landfill, a very schematic overview of our value chain. So you see our factory at the top. So we are manufacturing construction products. Our products end up onto construction sites or renovation sites, end up in the building where they stay for 40, 50, 60 years. At a certain moment, the building is deconstructed. And we want that the materials then go back to recycling, that we can have them back as a raw material into our production processes. The value chain that I show you here, which is a circular value chain and not a linear one, that's the one that we are building up at the moment. That's not the one that is existing. The reality today is that in our manufacturing plants, we are aiming to zero landfill for our own products, and we are quite close to that. even if we have in each of these plants still some materials which are very hard to get recycled. On construction sites, what we see today is that if there are leftovers of these materials, they end up into landfill, and in deconstruction, all glass mineral wool, rock mineral wool that is coming out of the production, out of the deconstruction sites, end up in the landfill all over Europe. It's a given at the moment, and that's really the reason why we took an entrepreneurial approach on this perspective. If you can bring me to the next slide. On the top side, the normal, the usual, because it's not the normal, the usual way of looking to deconstruction waste, a lot of mixed waste. In the waste collection, what we see is that certain things like masonry are sometimes sorted on deconstruction sites, but the mineral wool in the majority of the European countries is not sorted the same as for gypsum boards, where we see that these are typically products which have difficulties to be sorted on deconstruction sites for two reasons. First of all, because it's labor intensive work, so we need to process it into the new vision of working on deconstruction sites, but also because there is no recycling capacity, and that was a solution that we wanted to foresee. If you can bring me to the next slides, that's the reason that you can directly go to the next one to spare some time. Can you bring me to the next slide? Yeah, that's the reason that we built a recycling process. You can bring me to the picture. So that's a new plant that we have built in Belgium. It's a pilot plant. We have always been manufacturing products from 4th of July on, because that's the official start date of this plant. We'll start recycling mineral wool instead of producing it. I hope you still hear me. I see that on the right side you have a reception hall, so that's where we will receive glass mineral wool. We will take it in, we'll shred it. We'll put it then in the middle building where you see fusion. So we will melt the glass mineral wool with a gas oxygen melter to create glass granulates, and that's what you see in the left side. And we will produce cullet out of that, and that cullet we will use into our own production sites. Why are we doing this? As I told you on the previous slide, what we see today is that by the fact that there is no recycling process, people don't start to collect it separately. So we really wanted to create the momentum into the market. That's the reason that we set this up. I said many times, I used the word pilot. For us, this is a pilot plant. It's the first one we put like this. It's a new type of business that we are entering, the waste recycling business, and which is also important, and that will probably create my link with the presentation that Dominic will make, is that for us, we decided a few months ago already that to start this up, we would not start it up as Knauf Insulation, because we are product manufacturers, but we created a small startup who receives this pilot plant, if you want, who receives the money also to run it for the next years, and to transform this into a real recycling business, which will become our new way of or one of the new ways that we want to have new secondary raw materials, which normally should fit us even much better than the secondary raw materials and the glass cullet that we can buy on the market today. So that's in brief a story. As you've seen, the figures are available. This is quite a big plant. We speak about an investment of initially 15 million. I think with the last add-ups, we're probably heading closer to 20 million. So a very big investment, but we really believe that we need to integrate this as part of our future business, and that's the transition that we have in front of us, and we need to play an active entrepreneurial role in this. Thank you. Yeah, this one you can skip. And that's the name of the startup for your information, Resolution.
Okay, so Thank you very much, Mark. So we have some questions here for you, but perhaps we could go to Dominic's presentation, and we will share all the comments and the questions we are receiving through the chat in order to start a discussion with participants afterwards. So, Dominic, I see that you are here, so the floor is yours. Thank
Yeah.
you very much, and I will share the presentation for you.
Yes, and I'm sorry for the technical problems. This is sometimes like that, but I think now you can hear me clearly, and hopefully see my screen also in a second. So perfect. So yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for the invitation today to present also the case of Concula. I think it really is quite interesting to see both presentation, and maybe this also answers then some questions. So Concula is addressing, or Concula is actually a digital platform for circular construction, and it's addressing actually one of the biggest problems in the way we are facing now the climate change, because as most of you know, you're all knowledgeable in your domain that the construction sector is the largest polluter in the world, with 60% of waste and 40% of GHG emissions. And when we look there, what we mostly looking at is the energy efficiency of buildings. But when you right now build something new, around 70% of the CO2 emissions is actually due to the construction of the production of materials, and only 30% is due to the energy in the use phase of the building. So this is that means that we more and more have to shift and not only look at the energy efficiency in the use phase of buildings, but also at the embodied carbon, because this is around 20% of all global GHG emissions. But this is not done today, because the principle we are following today is the take, make, waste principle. So we produce these, we take resources out of our soil, we produce materials, and then we put it into buildings. And after like 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they are just getting landfilled. And that this is not the way it should go, because a lot of these materials are in a high quality. And in the best case, they are downcycled. In the worst case, they are just landfilled, and only 1% of materials are really highly reused or recycled. And that is, of course, not what we should do, because when you follow the circular economy strategies, you can see that recycling and recurring is actually one of the last things to do. It's linear economy, and the circular economy is much more above. It's reuse, it's refurbish, it's repurpose, and so on. And we have to follow that. So this is why we from Concula, we really want to go from the landfilling to the reuse of these materials. And this is not only us, but this is also the society, or also the policymakers. And this is also why we are here today, because there's more and more regulation coming from the EU, but also from national and local levels. From the EU, the taxonomy for sustainable finance is one of the big drivers, but also the local laws. And another driver in the construction industry is, of course, the material scarcity. We see it more and more. Materials are getting more expensive because the raw materials, they are just not anymore available. Our resources are endless. And what's really interesting is actually that the materials are already there. They're in our built environment. But looking at where we are, we see that we are still very early in the adoption curve of circular economy. But as said, like the materials or the raw materials, but also materials and products which we can use for the circular economy, they're not coming out of our soil anymore. They're coming from our built environment. And this is why we have to change how we look at the buildings. We have to look at the buildings as material stocks, and we have to look at them as a source of new buildings and products. So we have to completely change that to create a material loop. And this is, of course, only possible if we really create a value chain in the circular economy. So this is a huge challenge, because it can be not only one actor, it can be not only a manufacturer making that possible. It can be not only a project developer, architect, and so on possible. It must be the complete value chain, which has to work together to really deliver a circular economy solution. And we think this circular economy evolution is based on 4 pillars. First, we really have to digitize materials in new and existing buildings using so-called material passports, meaning we have to give the buildings an identity. Right now, the building you are in, the building I'm in, no one really knows what materials are in. And if this building is deconstructed or refurbished or retrofitted, the deconstruction company is the first company who knows what's in there, and that's too late because then the process is already starting. We need that already much earlier. That means that if you build a new building, these materials have to be digitized. If we deconstruct the building, we already have to know a couple of months or even years before what materials are in, because then we can also sell these materials to the demand. Because we have a supply, then we can go to demand. This, of course, only works if we build these value chains locally. So we need local hubs where these materials are getting refurbished, where manufacturers are taking the materials back, have their own production lines where they're getting refurbished and then put again into a new life. And very important is to measure also the impact. So really have to do a life cycle assessment. We are already doing that for the use phase of a building. But as said, when 70% are responsible for the embodied carbon, why are we not taking that into account in an LCA? So we really have to look at the full LCA of the full life cycle of the building. And then we can also measure what impact has the recirculation of materials. We started with that 10 years ago with a very simple idea of just creating a marketplace where you can just buy and sell these materials. And we grew that to the largest marketplace for reclaimed construction materials in Europe. And that worked pretty fine. But what we saw is that is not the solution, because here we have more private owners. We have private DIY and so on who are buying these products, but the large project owner, building owners, and so on, they're not using it because of a lot of challenges. And this, but there's actually the impact, and this is why we then took the next step 2 years ago to build a Concula, which is a digital ecosystem for circular construction, which actually have 3 pillars. We first digitize materials in buildings for new and existing. We measure then the embodied carbon and reduce the embodied carbon by recirculating these materials. Digitizing buildings for new buildings is quite easy with BIM and so on, but the real challenge, and also the most important, is actually existing buildings, because the new buildings, we will see the effect in 30, 40 years. For the existing buildings, we will see the effect much earlier, and we have to, of course, reduce CO2 emissions now. So this is why we have to digitize existing buildings. We can use that with we can do that with the software which we developed, but also 3D scans, which then can scan the room and can also then automatically already recognize what materials are in a room and create like kind of BIM models then. And from that, you have a good structure, a base from which you then be able to, first of all, calculate how much embodied carbon is in a building, but also what's the potential to reduce this, and what is also the material value potential. Because right now you look at it as waste, because you would landfill it, so you have to pay for landfilling. But when you now sell these materials, you get money. So the building is also getting completely different value. And if you then have the embodied carbon, you can reduce it by creating these value chains. There we are focusing on very specific materials, very easy to disassemble and also quite good to sell. We're working there with the manufacturers, recycling companies, refurbishment companies. They're taking these materials and then they are creating new production lines where they really take that as a material to build new products out of it. This is, for example, the case for gypsum, but also bricks, facade, wood elements, and so on. And of course, there's also some hard nuts to crack, such as concrete and steel beams in the future. And just to give you an impression, we in Germany, we were able to do that on 40 buildings in 2021. However, 20,000 buildings were demolished last year in Germany. So that's just a minimal fraction, meaning there's so much potential to scale solutions and to have 100 more Conculas in Germany and all over Europe. And this is also what we want to encourage. And maybe an important point to make circularity possible, and this is what I actually talked before, is that you have to engage everyone in the value chain. And this is why, for example, we created this Concula Circularity Partner Program, where from each of the different stages of the construction process, there are partners which we link together, which are working together, which are also manufacturers, for example, where competitors also talking to each other on how they can bring circularity in their products and how they can support the part before and after them, so that you can really deliver a material loop. A good example is also the city of Berlin, which now or like last year introduced a law which is saying that all the buildings which are getting demolished, they have to be assessed for the recirculation potential. That is now holding for public buildings and will be extended to private buildings this year. Another example in Berlin is to create a reuse construction market. So a market where only materials which are reclaimed can be bought online and so on. So this is also a good initiative which a lot of cities can do. And to end this presentation, maybe showing you on one project how that looks like. This is a project 20,000 square meters in the city of Düsseldorf. It's a former bank building. It will be retrofitted, and there we, for example, identified materials such as this natural stone facade, a lot of lighting, but raised floors, industrial kitchens, and so on. Materials worth 1.8 million euros. So normally you had to pay 500,000 to get rid of them. Now you have a value of 1.8 million. So the difference is 2.3 million euro you can make by being sustainable. And so there's a huge opportunity because you can combine economic and ecological aims together. And yeah, with that, I'm really looking forward for the discussion, and thank you for listening.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dominic. I am sure that there are many questions for both of you. I see that in the chat we have only one question for Mark. As a large company, how do you foresee the collaboration with SMEs and startups to close the loop of the construction materials? So I think that, in fact, it was a question for Mark, but I think that could be for both of you, and indeed, Mark has already partially answered this question during his presentation. But please, Mark and Dominic, how do you see this collaboration for closing the value chain in circularity?
I'm not sure if Mark is still here.
I'm afraid that Mark is not
So
here at the moment. So
maybe he restarted because also of technical problems. So you're referring to the questions regarding collaboration between SMEs and
yeah,
startups, right?
yeah.
So for us, it's essential. It's essential to have this collaboration because this is such a big challenge we face. So there's not one company, also SME or startup. So also big companies, they can't do it alone. We all have to work together. And I think what startups can do is they can bring innovation in, they can bring in fresh ideas, they can challenge the status quo. And SMEs and producers, manufacturers, and so on, they really have the power. They have a big base. They also have the capital. They have a lot of other abilities, and they also have the knowledge and the trust. So working with them together is really beneficial. And for example, what we want to do at Concula, we don't want to cut out anyone. We think all the existing actors, they can still be there. They just have to be better connected. The only actor who's losing in this process will be the landfills. And I think it's not a big problem if the landfills are losing. All other losers. So I think it will not work without any collaboration. But what I also see is that there's also a lot of demand for collaboration. from larger companies to startups. So, and I think this is something really interesting, and this is something which we are, which is also showing the urgency of our industry.
Okay, thank you very much. I see that Mark is not here because he's trying to enter, but everyone, he has problems. So hopefully, he's able to join us later on. But anyway, I think we have some questions for you. Uh, so the yeah, let me see. How do you ensure that the materials are valid for the next use? I guess that this is for you, but
Mm.
I don't know if it is. I guess that it is also for Mark.
Yes, I I keep the. I hope Mark is joining, but until then, I keep the force for Mark. I think it's also a big problem for manufacturers. Maybe I don't want to go too big in that topic because I'm not a manufacturer. But what we see is the manufacturers really they want to have these materials in a certain quality, and they don't get the materials, the raw materials in a certain quality, and that's a big issue for them. And I think here the material passports can play an essential role because then you really know what's in a material, what happened with a material, because you can trace a material also along the whole lifetime. And yeah, so how we doing that? How we are doing that for new buildings? I think it's not a bigger problem because you have the product data sheets for materials which are already put in a building. Of course, it's very important to have a pollutant report, which anyway has to be done if you do a refurbishment or a deconstruction. And then we have like some algorithms based on the year of the building, based on the location of the building, what kind of pollutants can be in the building, and that is then specifically checked. And then also there will be persons going really in that building and looking at the materials and assessing these materials. And these are really experts in their field, and they really know what to look at. And if there is the if they think these materials are not anymore able to have another life, then we are not taking these also in another life. So because in the end it's also the quality we from Concole have to provide, right? So we have a quite good quality assurance process that this does not happen, and it didn't happen so far.
Okay. So thank you very much. I don't know if someone else have some questions for. Yeah.
I
So,
also got a question privately. I just can speak it out.
oh, yes,
How
please.
how do you identify different materials using scan to BIM? And I think that's a very good question. So I think scan to BIM can be a good can give a good first impression. The problem is when you, for example, scan this room, you don't know what's behind the wall, you don't know what's below a surface, and so it doesn't give you a 100% image of a building. However, it gives you already a good glance of what can be in a building, and you can also go back if you forgot something and so on, and it can really get the measurements and so on. But it's only complementary to an assessment of real people using our software, which is then structured. They go in the building, they get like a step-by-step introduction, like what they have to do. That we are also, for example, engaging on like tests or prototypes of deconstructing something, or looking behind the facade, how was the facade put into the building and so on. So that must be still part of it. But what we think is that experts specifically for that will be coming up, because every building we deconstruct, we have to more and more look closely what do we do with these materials. And this is also why I think there will be a new job field of people only focusing on looking at existing buildings and how materials are put in, and then digitizing these materials.
Okay. Thank you, and it's very interesting and very innovative also because I've never heard some solutions like yours. So in fact, we have some we have working at Technalia quite a lot in circularity, but mostly focus on building a structure, etc., but not exactly in the whole building with furniture, etc. And I think it is a very interesting approach. We have some new questions. One is, Dominic, in your company, what are the most demanded products you have? And then we have another one.
Yes, yeah, thanks for the question. So there's a lot of different types of products. So of course, interior materials are interesting, starting with lighting, starting with ceilings, with raised floors, with systemic walls, but also with facade elements out of wood, out of glass, different metals. Then we have bricks. We have yeah, gravel. We have, so it's very it's different type, like indoors, interior. But so what, for example, is not working very well are windows because of the energy efficiency requirements. The same with doors. Exterior doors are problematic. But yeah, a lot what is actually interior, because it's also very often built in a way that it can be replaced after a couple of years, but it's still in a good shape, because it's also doesn't have like the weather and so on. But externally, it's especially also the stones and so on, and the facade elements. Yeah. Maybe also the question from Jonas regarding the does
Yeah.
Concula work with cities? Yes, it's essential to work with cities. So we are working with, so we are operating right now in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and there we are working especially with the city of Berlin, Hamburg, Munich, Frankfurt, so all the big cities. And what they're doing is they're working with us on their current building stocks, because cities have a lot of buildings, and they're working also with us on regulations. And also, as the city of Berlin, they're also establishing these reuse hubs where you can really store the materials, or you can really refurbish the materials, and so on. And yeah, I think that's something really important. I think cities have a big part of the transition to circular economy, because they are also giving the rules. For example, if you have a new space where something can be built on, or something already existing, you can actually set the rules on like how this building is built. You can say, I want to have a circular building there, or I want to have a complete LCA calculation for that. Or if there's an existing building, you say, okay, you are not allowed to do deconstruct the building. So cities have a lot of power they should use to really follow the circular economy principles.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, I think that recently it has been a Green Deal call in these topics addressed to cities. Okay, we have a comment also from Bruno Daniotti saying that he was developed a device to identify internal materials in one of the project BIM for EEB. So I think that there are also other initiatives in this field that it is logical, because it's really a good solution for circularity materials.
And maybe I can just encourage to do that. I don't know the tool, but I will have a look into it. And I see also in other countries coming up solutions similar to Concula. And maybe also what's the idea behind Concula is not to build like yet a huge company which will take over everything, but to be an example for others to follow, and especially the legislation to follow, but also other companies, and creating that in their own countries.
Okay, so thank you very much. So I do not see any other questions. So perhaps we had some key points for discussion. Also, one is of course for you, Dominic. It was also for Mark, who unfortunately couldn't join us anymore, but also for the audience. So please send your comments also through the chat, because we would like to have everyone's opinion. The first question is, which are the key enables or drivers to promote circularity in the construction sector, and on the contrary, which are the main barriers for circularity. So, what do you think? And please, for the audience, send us your comments through the chat.
Yeah, I'm quite interested what the audience thinks about that. So what I would answer to both questions is policy and legislation first. So give you an example, there's no legislation, really no legislation, which is considering the introduction of construction materials reintroduction. So all the legislation right now in buildings is for new materials. There is actually, by the lawmaker, there's actually no way. It's just not, that just doesn't exist to reintroduce materials. And I think that's a big issue. There must be legislation which is allowing the reintroduction or recirculation of materials. And on the other side, there's a lot of legislation which is hindering it. So you can actually reduce of a lot of legislation and create new legislation, which is then really catering to circular economy in the construction sector. There's, of course, initiatives such as the EU Green Deal, and on a national level, there are some countries such as the Netherlands or also France and so on. But in the end, I think the will or the motivation is there at the different actors. We see manufacturers such as Knauf, we see architecture office, we see project developer, we see all of them they really want, but they're all operating in a field which is not made for circular economy. And if we want to make that happen, we really have to have lawmakers now giving us the opportunity, and they can't say anymore this needs to be developed or there is nothing like that or it's too risky. Concula is there, other companies are there doing that. So there's no excuse anymore to not give the regulation to make that.
I absolutely agree with you. As in many other fields, the legislation and regulation here is one of the main barriers because, okay, the rules are not, let's say, prepared or adapted as fast as we need to really implement circularity. And this is something that we have to work on that.
Yeah, and maybe also in the end, it's all legislation and so on. It all trickles down to changing the economic, to change it economically. Right now, it's too costly to reintroduce materials because new materials are subsidized and it's much easier. It's a known process and so on. And when you change these subsidies to the recirculation of materials, a lot would also change. Or if you think about the taxation of CO2 and so on. So there's a lot of instruments which are already existing where you could make this change quite easy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Concerning this, we have a comment and we have also some questions. But let me see the comment about the barriers. Some barriers: low cost of landfill. That's true. Lack of expertise to properly deconstruct. Lack of legislation to properly tackle the administrative route of recyclable construction materials, etc. So apart from legislation and economic barriers, we have also lack of skills to promote circularities in some areas. And I don't know if you have any other questions or comments regarding the enables and barriers about circularity. Yes, we have one here. Rough demolition is done with big machines. Cheap, gentle demolition and sorting of reusable materials are done by humans. That is expensive. That's true. That's true. But perhaps in future we can also work in robots to enable circularity. So, in fact, we have heard about some projects already in this field. Okay, and let's go back to some of the questions regarding your presentation and your technologies. There is one question. regarding the other tool, the BIM for EEB project. And the comment is that the tool is a fast mapping tool developed by RISE and CGI. I don't know if you have if you are aware of this tool, but I also recommend to have a look on that. And as time is also running, I think we have around 15 minutes again to comment about all these aspects. And I would like also to ask again to Dominic and to the audience, which are the most relevant RTD priorities to be developed in this field of circularity in construction? So this is one of the aspects I would like to share with you and to receive your comment. Which are the key RTD areas to be developed?
Yeah, there's a lot, but I think I think in general there must be much more money going to research. But I mean, this is also the event is about that, so that's already a good start. And I think it must be more explored on how we can deconstruct more selectively, how can we refurbish materials on a scale, and also how we can connect all the actors in the ecosystem. I think these are like a lot of the research projects which are important. And of course, like you could also say research about what could be the right policies and what can be the impact of the policies. So it's a different level of research which can be done. And of course, when you look at material passports, there's also a lot of research potential also, like how can you make traceable material passports. However, here I would say that we don't need research anymore because there are companies doing that already now. So these are loose my takes, but I'm interested to see what the audience thinks about that.
Yeah, in fact, I absolutely agree with you. So, in fact, we are developing some issues regarding the selectivity and demolition, and also using some techniques related to artificial vision, etc. But I'm sure that there are many other aspects. And okay, we have one comment here: durability of the new projects, of the new products using recycled materials. This is one of the aspects to be taken into consideration. Please, I don't know if you. I'm sure that you have many other issues to comment in this item of research and innovation aspects.
Maybe also to that comment, I think the perception is quite interesting right now. We perceive materials on secondary use as not the same quality, and that's a problem because it's very often the same or even better quality. And this is why we need research to prove that, to prove actually effect, which is a bit it's the same with like wooden buildings where people think they burn faster, which is not the case. And the same we have to prove with materials which are already at a secondary or third use, so that we have to prove they are not worse, they're sometimes even a better quality. And that's important. So it's a mindset change we have to maybe create by also research.
That's right. Yeah, in many cases, in fact, in many cases, the final material is exactly the same as the original one. The only change is the source of the raw material, but finally the final product is very often the same. So one of the aspects, in my opinion, could be a barrier that could be one of the RTD issues is let's see, the homogeneity of the secondary waste materials you use, because in some cases you cannot guarantee that you always have the same secondary raw material, and perhaps sometimes this could be a limitation, especially if you need to produce big quantities, let's say in a continuous production line.
And so this is, for example, the case for cement. For the cement production, I think that's a big issue because you can't really assess the quality, or very difficult the quality of the raw material when it's coming from deconstruction. And I think here there must be much more research happening to really come to to come to something helpful.
Yeah, that's right. And but I think what of the areas of opportunity do you foresee in the cross-cutting between digital technologies and materials technologies or circularity? So the introduction of new digital technologies can be a, a driver for promoting new aspects in or new RTD fields in circularity.
I think it's key. I think combining the digital abilities with like the science and the material, the knowledge about material and so on, and saving that and organizing that with digital tools, I think it's the key, because this is how we can spread knowledge much faster. This is how we can execute it much faster. This is in the end how we can even only make it happen. That's why the digital space is the most important right now, because I mean there were already efforts like 20 years ago and so on, and we didn't have the digital tools, but we had the good ideas on in the practice, but it didn't work because it was not able to spread that fast. Now we have the digital tools, and by combining that with the practice, I think, and this is actually what we see also, technologies like such as BIM and so on, they're really helping now to shape the circular economy in the construction sector when combining that and creating like databases which can combine all the data, and from which you then can perform different operations.
That's right. So here, in fact, we have a comment on that also. Digitization, and especially linked to digital building passport, will play a significant role to identify which materials are recyclable before a renovation or a demolition. And that's true. This is one of the examples. So we had prepared some Slido polls for you. So if you go to Slido and you go to polls, okay, let me see. We have three questions for you, and the first one is, but I hope it will work. And the first one is, in your opinion, which are the key drivers to promote circularity in the construction sector? And you have some questions here: cost reduction, scarcity of raw materials, minimize the mining impact, reducing landfill, or avoiding CO2 emissions in manufacturing. So you can select, I think, three. And we have some answers here, but we will wait 2 or 3 minutes to get your answer. I see that only five of you are voting, so I encourage you to send us your opinion, because it's very, very interesting for us, and also to get or to promote some research and innovation topics in Build for People. So let me see if I can share. Here you can see that cost reduction is a very relevant topic to be. Well, we all know that this is very, very fundamental. I think that, as it has been mentioned, the automatization of some of the processes could be very useful, but not only. So, okay, we have a scarcity of raw materials with 18%. Minimizing the mining impact, it seems not to be the most relevant issue. And the same for reducing landfill, but avoiding CO2 emissions in manufacturing is also a key aspect. Okay, so we will go also to the second question, that is also which are the barriers hindering circularity. We have already mentioned about this acceptance of the stakeholders, heterogeneity of waste materials, need to adapt production processes, complexity of recovery processes. I don't know if you can. Okay, so we have here some votes. It seems that we have not many votes. Let's wait a little bit. But it seems that one of the key issues here is the acceptance by the stakeholders and the end users, and also the need to adapt production processes, including logistics. And on the contrary, it seems that the complexity of recovery process in certain materials is not as important as other options. So let's wait a little bit. Okay, and finally, I will launch the last one, that is which are the three most relevant RTD priorities that need to be addressed to improve circularity. And you have here some aspects: integration of construction and demolition waste in new construction, new public and private procurement approaches, new processes, business models, and financing mechanisms, and models and digital tools for better informed decision making, digital innovation, development and integration of approaches, tools to support designing out waste, and new value chain based services. So let's wait a couple of minutes. So, okay, as far as we see, integration of construction and demolition waste in new construction and industrial and regional symbiosis seems to be the most relevant, together with models and digital tools for better informed decision making on investments and improved risk management for the built environment. Also, tools for designing out waste and complying of information of products at property level seems to be important. So, in general, the digital aspects, as we have commented together in this with circularity, is a very good mix here. So I think that we are out of time now, and we have to go to the wrap up session. So thank you very much for all of you for this very interesting session, and let's go to the main stage to wrap up the the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.